5th, 9 o'clock, and time for the Board of County Commissioners meeting. We're going to begin with an invocation by Commissioner Wesley Davis, and I'll follow with the pledge. Please rise.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to conduct the public's business in the public eye. Please give us your knowledge, your wisdom, and guidance as we maneuver through this agenda. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or deletions to today's agenda? There being none, I'll accept the motion for the agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Motion from Commissioner Fletcher, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the regular meeting minutes of June 7th. We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Wheeler, a second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item L.
Same.
Anybody else want to pull anything?
Move to approve consent agenda as amended.
We have a motion to approve as amended by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Fletcher. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item L is the change order number 5 on the Sector 3 beach renourishment project. And I'm all supportive of moving this forward because I think it's important we get Sector 3 done. But I guess one thing I didn't see in here is how do we know there's not going to be a phase 4? That we're going to extend this one more time. We're short 100 and something thousand cubic yards. You know, where in this is there some deadlines and penalties to make sure this thing gets done and no more messing around with it? And I don't know if that's a legal question, Bill, or for Chris, but kind of I'd like to see something so that Ranger knows that this is it. And if it doesn't get done within the time allocated, if they can't get with their subcontractors and make sure the sand is stockpiled and ready to go. And, you know, I know the first year we had some glitches. I understand that. It was a big learning curve for everybody here, and I understand that completely. But it seems to me at this point we've learned everything now, and with this extension, it should be perfect. And so what do we have in here to give it some teeth to make sure that it does get done?
Well, Chris Moore, our Public Works Director, there's a couple of things working for us this time that I think that we didn't have before. Number one, we have plenty of time now to finish the remaining 108,000 cubic yards of sand. If they get started now and start stockpiling it and start delivering it in November, there's going to be plenty of time to get it through in the 6 months between November 1st and May 1st. Another incentive that we've built into the contract and that the board approved was the prepayment for stockpiled sand. That's a built-in incentive now for them because they get early payment for stockpiling that sand, getting it tested, dredged, and put in a pile at the mine. That's an incentive for them to get it going earlier as opposed to later. Ranger has pushed for that all along because what they want to do is get it all stockpiled so that they can gather their trucks and maneuver them in and get them in and out of there quickly and hopefully get it done well before May 1st of 2012. So we feel there's enough incentives built into the contract now that we'll be able to finish this last 108,000 cubic yards.
Have we gotten a notice to proceed from DEP yet?
James Gray, County Coastal Engineer. No, we have not received the notice to proceed on Phase 2 remainder. However, we've had conversations with DEP, and there's nothing that precludes us, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit side, there's nothing that will preclude us from moving forward with finishing the project. Only the areas that we have not touched, project areas that we have not started filling.
Okay. What do we need to do to get them to move on that? I mean, we don't need to wait till November 1st for them to issue this thing. Why can't we get it tomorrow?
We have been pursuing that. Again, DEP just wants to make sure that there's no project performance issues from the previous phases.
And when are they going to make that determination?
Usually the determination is after nesting season's over. But there's nothing in this phase 2 remainder that would, again, there's no test plan, sea turtle nesting test plan that would qualify us or disqualify us for remaining or completing the remaining.
Right, and just, the nesting season goes until the end of October, correct? And we won't have final data numbers till the end of November again, right? I mean, this is what put us in a bind this last phase is we didn't get the notice to proceed until the end of November. And I don't know, do we need to get a hold of our representatives and tell them to bark on DEP to just send the thing now and be done with it? Because they've given us the permit. So it really shouldn't matter what the turtles do this year. We still have a valid permit. And
Agree.
And so we just need to get this thing done so we can get moving. Now, what about Fish and Wildlife? We still need a...
Staff has been submitting monthly sea turtle nesting data reports to the Fish and Wildlife, as well as there's other monitoring qualifiers, escarpment formation and such, and we've been providing that to all agencies ahead of time.
But we still need to sign off on the Archie Carr folks, is that correct?
We still have not received the special use permit. Again, there's nothing that would prevent us from receiving that. Staff has had several discussions with them, Archie Carr folks, and there's no properties other than the refuge, the entire refuge that would that they manage. So they could not decline us placement material.
All right. Well, just, I want this thing done, quite frankly, and I think we've learned all the mistakes, and there shouldn't be anything holding us back to move forward to getting this done and completed here. So whatever we need to do, if we need to push DEP hard to get the notice to proceed, keep working with the Fish and Wildlife folks and get them on board, and then just, let Ranger know that this is their last chance to get it done. And just, I don't know, I didn't see anybody from Ranger here, but, we just need to let them know this is it. With all the mistakes we figured out, they need to make sure their sub guys stockpile the sand, have it ready to go, and this thing should go smoothly from here on. And we just need to let Ranger know that, this is it. Get it done. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, another question I have with this contract and also extending this order, and I know I've gotten several phone calls and emails, et cetera, about the payment of the fuel adjustment and so on and so forth for the dredging operation, the haulers. And one, I'd like to see if there's something we can, some way to incorporate where that doesn't happen. I don't know, I'm getting stories about, the payment and so on and so forth. And I know Ranger paid one mine operator, and then allegedly that mine operator hasn't forwarded the money and so on and so forth, and it's created quite a problem. So I'd like to know that, is there anything we can do to avoid this in the future, or is there anything we can do to make a correction on this, or find out what the facts are? Do we have any authority?
Well, number one, it's a little bit difficult because we're dealing with subs that we don't have any direct control over. Our contract is with Ranger. We pay Ranger, and then they turn around and pay their subs, and sometimes they pay subs of the subs. Now, one thing we've been talking with the attorney's office about is prior to ending the project and making final payment that we require a release, all of the subcontractors should sign off on a release of liens so that we don't make final payment until we're ensured that they've been paid at least up to that date.
So if they have a lien, we'll hold the money back until they get paid, and then
That's correct.
the final payment
That could
will
be
go out.
done. We often do that at the end of a project just to make sure that everybody is up to date before we release the final payment.
So it's likely they'll get their money, it's just going to take longer.
Right. Now, one thing we've heard about up until now is that the subcontractors have been paid for delivering the sand, but not the fuel cost adjustment that was approved by the board, and that it was possibly a decision by one of the miners to hold that money back and not distribute it to the subs. So we paid it through Ranger. Ranger paid it to the mine operator, and then it didn't go any farther than that. I'm talking about the fuel cost adjustment now.
But that'll all be adjusted in the end product, then. It may just
That's
take
our
several
goal.
more months, but,
Exactly.
so, okay.
Let me explain.
And I encourage them to pay it up front and get this thing settled.
I was
Working relationship.
contacted by the truckers that they didn't get it, and also the dredge operators. And we sat down with the truckers, and they had gotten some of the payments, and there was also some confusion, and I think now they realize that they thought they'd get it in phase one, and we didn't approve that. It was clearly the intent of the commission, the reason you did it, was to help the local truckers and the local dredge operation. They were even here to support it. We did pay Ranger, so I think the truckers, we've sat down and showed them how we calculate. I think now they're satisfied. And now the dredge operators have been contacted by them, and they were not paid. The dredge operators, which were subcontractors, and I think Ranger paid their sub, but the sub at the mine did not pay the dredge operators. Say that now. Legally, Alan's office has advised me that we can't get involved. However, I think the commission was very clear in their intent here that the local people were paid, and that's why they were here. And I think this will help if we do get the, if we do wait for release.
Release of lien.
Release of lien. So they didn't issue and file lien.
That will be a big help. But I want to let everyone know I have been contacted by the truckers. I think we've got it resolved, and the dredge operators, which have not.
Okay.
And hopefully they'll sit down between each other and work it out. I think.
Hope so.
Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you. And Commissioner O'Brien covered my first point, and Commissioner Wheeler, thank you for touching on the second point. I'm quite surprised we don't see Mr. Bob Schaefer here today. As this is an important earmark in this process, I too would like to see this process completed as quickly as possible. But I do share the same concern about item number 4 on the change order, where it provides for the prepayment for the stockpile sand and the fuel adjustment. And it's my understanding that the fuel adjustment has not been dispersed in the most equitable fashion. It did not get to the people in which we intended to. That's taxpayer dollars that we intended to get to the local operators, the people that we wanted to ensure that they had the continued process and they were compensated fairly. I do realize that council has advised that we cannot interfere with the subcontractors' actions, but I see 2 of the subcontractors here today. And I'd like to know if they received any payment from Bob Schaefer, and I think it would be appropriate for them to, or from Ranger Construction, as we authorized the disbursement of the funds, and the intention was to go directly throughout the process and include the truckers and the operators of the machinery. I believe there was 2 different elements of that fuel adjustment cost, and that was the operation of the equipment and then the trucking fuel cost. And it's my understanding, broad scale, that it has not gotten to where it needed to get to. And I do see that Ranger Construction is represented today. So I'd like to ask if you can just describe how that process went through, because I'm concerned about the next change order. And if there is a fuel adjustment, what assurances do we have that the public funds are going to be dispersed and they're going to get to where they need to get to? Yes, sure.
Patrick Flynn, Ranger Construction. We have dispersed the majority of the funds. I believe one of the trucking companies, not Siboney or IRC, have been paid. Ranger themselves hasn't been paid for all the fuel adjustment yet. So
Ranger has not been paid for all of the fuel adjustment?
No. So the only things that have not been paid, the majority has been prepaid. Ranger's prepaid all the money before we've received it, but we have not received the last fuel adjustment or the last sand material, in fact. But everybody has been paid.
Joe, is that correct? Would you?
Well, we have paid, and that is probably correct. And let me have Chris and
Yeah, we've put through all the invoices, and James, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, we've put through all the invoices that we felt were needed to be paid. They've been paid, and I know Patrick with Ranger has passed through the money. As Joe mentioned, there was some confusion with some of the truckers over, does the fuel cost adjustment apply to Phase 1 sand or Phase 1 remainder sand? And as the board approved, it applied only to Phase 2 sand. And that was the source of some confusion with the truckers. That's been resolved. And I think if there are any remaining invoices, we may still have them and are processing them, but they'll be paid just as soon as we can.
Yeah, the last invoice that we haven't been paid, it's been a survey confusion between two survey companies, so it's just taken time. But as far as fuel's been, Ranger's prepaid 99% of the fuel. We just have one trucking company that, until this was resolved, which we resolved Friday, they'll be receiving a check right away.
we can verify the fact that I've talked to the truckers. Ranger had contracted with the truckers direct, and those truckers have been paid what we have paid Ranger. They've now come to that conclusion. There was some confusion. Well, no, this is, they also had a misunderstanding that went all the way back to Phase 1, which was not approved. But, so we know that Ranger has paid the truckers for the fuel adjustment now that we sat down with them from what we have paid Ranger, so that's being fair. Now, Ranger has paid the mines, and now the dredge operators at the mines say that they were not paid the fuel adjustment. So we know that Ranger has paid the mines everything that we've paid Ranger for processing as far as a fuel adjustment. So we've been able to track that, we feel. So it's what has happened is now the dispute is with the mine operator and their subs, which are the dredge operators. That seems to be the situation now. We've been able to resolve all the others. Is that a correct way to put it?
I believe that.
And Ranger has paid the mine operations from what we can tell.
So Ranger is not holding any funds that needs to be dispersed to the subcontractors?
We actually I took some estimates of my own. We've actually overpaid, but yeah, we paid everything.
And I see the two of the subcontractors here. Is there anything that you all would like to add? Do you believe that the information you just got about the disbursement is fair and is rolling towards the intended benefit that was directed by this commission?
Yes, sir. Steve Smith, I own the Rancho Lake Sand Mine, and Patrick's right. I mean, they've been, if anything, prepaying us with the fuel, and then there's been adjustments here and there based on what the county did or didn't pay. Some of the sand that was actually processed and delivered in Phase 2 time got placed in Phase 1 area, so that was part of the confusion that Chris was talking about. But yeah, we've gotten paid our fuel money to our satisfaction. I've got a full and final release from one of my dredge contractors. The other one that stopped dredging 6 weeks before the project was over with, we've got some ongoing issues with that. Apparently there's going to be attorneys involved, so I can't really get into all the details in public.
Well, we can't discuss that anyway under advisement of counsel. That's your business dealings.
It will get resolved.
I'm just concerned about the public funding and how it was distributed.
It was prepaid by me. I can't go into all the details, but they've been more than compensated. So.
And just Mr. Kramer?
Well, Steve's here. Steve, is there anything at all that if we approve this change order, do you have a dredge on site where you can start stockpiling sand tomorrow?
I've got one on the way now. I signed a contract last week that's going to, again, because of some issues that we had with one of our dredge operators, we didn't quite finish the job last time, which it's my pit. I'll take the blame for it. But on our dime, we didn't ask the county to help with the mobilization, but it's $116,000 that is coming out of our pocket because we have to bring another dredge in now. But I'll have it ready.
Okay, so there's nothing else on the horizon, nothing else going on. Your sand reserves are still good.
Yes, sir.
Everything is good. That whenever that dredge gets here next week, you can start processing and stockpiling sand to get this finished off?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm bringing a big dredge in, so there's not going to be any hiccups.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Kramer?
Chuck Kramer, Fisher and Sons. I think you're moving in the right direction to resolve part of the problem as to how the funds get dispersed, but I think that you have to look at the phases as their own entity, and to say at the end of the third phase that would be when the county's motive would be to make sure everybody's paid for the fuel surcharge. And I'm not too sure the participants that were in the first two phases will be there in the third phase. So that remedy is fine for the ongoing phases, but it's not going to solve the lack of distribution of the funds in the second phase. And I think you need to consider that because it directly affects who's going to perform the third phase.
At this point, General, I'm going to suggest that we ask the Attorney's Office to take a good hard look at this.
Yes.
I think we're traipsing on things which are outside our purview, because at some point, we're interfering with an existing contract, and I'd rather we didn't do that. But I think it's fair enough to direct our Attorney's Office to make sure that everything that we can do to make sure that the taxpayers' interests are protected are being done.
And that was my original intention. I believe we
think
brought it out to public light, and I believe the attorneys can best address it.
But that's our intent. Our intent, we're just asking for what we all work for the county to approve, and I think it needs to be distributed on the pretense that that was your intention.
That's fine with you?
Yes.
It's okay with this board if we
Yes,
just
thank
leave
you.
that for...
Yes.
A question for Chuck then. Chuck, you're a sub to the mine, is that correct?
What's that?
You're a subcontractor to the mine?
We're a sub.
Okay. Are you guys been paid the fuel adjustment?
No.
Okay.
No, we have not. And it grieves me to have to bring this to the commissioners.
But again,
But
at
so
this
far,
point...
we haven't been able to resolve the issue.
At this point, I'd rather not continue it, because at this point, we're dealing with a contract that's out there, and if we interfere with the contract too much, then we might be liable on the contract. I think that's the advice that we've gotten from our attorney, and again, I'd like to have him pursue it from this point on.
Well, just, Mr. Chairman, just from a technical point of view, I think our contract with Ranger expired May 1st, or what we're talking about doing, the actual work part of that contract has expired, and this change order is extending that work order, the project thing. So, technically, I don't think we're on that thin of ice. I think we do need to get this cleared up, because this is extending the construction contract, which expired May 1st.
Counsel?
That was the reason I'm kind of bringing this forward. It seems that it would be better to resolve past issues before you move forward, because they directly bear on, the future final phase. And if say, we as a contractor, we don't participate in that last phase, we don't have the advantage of being able to use the measures to enforce payment from the phase prior. You understand what I'm saying here? In other words, if we don't participate in phase 3, we have virtually, the way you want to set it up, we have no way to recover funds from the end of phase 2. And that worries me, because it's a substantial amount of money.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
I understand what everybody's saying here, but if we're not careful, I don't know that we're going to be able to remedy something that looks like it's going to have to go to litigation. And if we start holding up change order 5 on litigation of phase 2, I don't know that that's getting accomplished what we want to get done here today.
I agree with you.
I agree.
I don't have any answers on either side.
But we're trying to resolve it.
Sure. And I see your point, Mr. Kramer.
Everybody needs to be aware of what is. So, again, thank you for your time. Good morning, gentlemen.
Thanks, Chuck. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve change order number 5.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis. I'll go ahead and second it. Any other discussion? I'll just note that it was a good summary, Mr. Gray. gave us a good wrap-up of the history, and I appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next, we've got public items, and the first is a public hearing, proposed fair housing workshop, and the first public hearing to consider applying for a community development block grant. And we have Mr. Olson coming up. Good morning, Eric.
Well, good morning. Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. With me also, I have Corbett Allday, the Guardian Community Resource Management Group. We're going to talk about today something that is sort of a completion of the project, if you will. Nearly 4 years ago, West Wabasso was in the process of working with the county in basically putting water into the system there. And I think it's pretty much everybody remembered some of the situations that occurred in West Wabasso. It was kind of one of those forgotten areas that we went into. We had the ability to go into areas that really had never seen services in decades, if ever. Within that process, we actually formed a partnership working with the residents there with West Wabasso. And through a process of CDBG development grants and SHIP funding, we were able to put in water all the way up and connecting them to the resident's house. And so here we are today. We want to complete the project. We're going to open a public hearing today at your approval, basically allowing us to apply for a CDBG grant of $750,000. The CDBG grant will now move into the development of installation of sewers within this area. It'll be a two-phase project. We're going to submit 2 different separate CDBG grant applications if the board approves. And in the process of that, our intent is to construct this thing as we receive funding. There will be 2 forms of funding in the first phase, the first of which would be CDBG, which will be the lion's share of the project cost installation. The utilities personnel will do all of the design, all the permitting, all the installation inspection, much like we did with the project with the water system there in West Wabasso. This one, again, I've got to recognize the fact that this community has been one of those communities that perhaps in years past wished to have services, and now we're here to kind of complete the loop, if you will, like that. So with approval from the commission, what we'd like to do is to open this public hearing. I'm going to then turn it over to Corbett Allday, let him conduct the public fair housing portion of this hearing itself, so that if you're in fact approving of this, we can then move forward. One of the things that we need to recognize, this is a very aggressive application schedule. We're here today on July 5th. The actual application, inclusive of all the public hearings, have to be completed by August 15th. We've looked at that schedule. We can meet that schedule, so we're prepared to proceed forward on this. So in the process of approving this, you'll note that there are going to be a total of 4 different options that we can select from in terms of the CDBG portion. Corbett will describe those a little bit more in detail. We have selected neighborhood revitalization, and he'll explain to you the pluses and the minuses of each of those application sequences. So if the commission would so approve, we'll formally open this meeting at your recognition, and then we'll turn it over to Corbett for the public fair housing portion.
Any questions of staff? I just have one question. Do you want to hold the fair housing workshop first or the public hearing first?
The public hearing. We're going to let the experts direct us here.
We'll open the public hearing. Anybody from the public want to speak on this item? Asking one more time. Anybody from the public? Maybe I just don't do it the way Mr. Davis does to get... There being no one hit the public hearing who wishes to speak, we will close this portion of the public hearing. And now...
And I'm going to turn it over to Corbett and let him proceed with the fair housing portion.
Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. Corbett Allday from Groveland, Florida, with Guardian CRM. We are a contract program management firm working with local governments to improve the efficiency and spread the the money farther to achieve more with our tax dollars. This morning, I just want to cover briefly the Citizens Participation Plan requirements for you to be able to apply for a Community Development Block Grant. This is a two-hearing process. The first hearing is simply an informational workshop for the citizens. We also tag on a fair housing public information for about 2 minutes, and also in compliance with a CDBG policy or fair housing ordinance. The Community Development Block Grant Program came along in the 70s. It's a grant to the state of Florida from HUD. It is taxpayer funded, and it is a competitive process to what we call non-entitlement communities, counties in this case of less than 200,000 population in the unincorporated county. The application cycle comes up every year. It's a competitive process, and the focus of Community Development Block Grant Program is to benefit low and moderate income persons. That's defined by HUD as 80% of the area median income or less, and that's updated every year by HUD. And I'm sure you've dealt with that before in other programs. The county's had several Community Development Block Grant programs. The other types of activities we can do with CDBG are disaster recovery and emergencies. The categories that we can apply for in the regular Community Development Block Grant Program that you're eligible to apply for and this public hearing is about are housing, rehab. You may be familiar with that. That's a set of scattered sites, single-family application process for code and safety. It's a lot of direct benefit, but you can't benefit very many people with a housing grant. You can only benefit about 10 houses. A neighborhood category, which would be the sewer project, you can benefit a lot more houses in indirect ways with neighborhood infrastructure like sewer and water. And then commercial revitalization, which would be more appropriate to a city, a downtown and community revitalization area, sidewalks and lighting and those kinds of activities. Economic development is the last activity which does not conflict with the regular category, and if should you choose at a future time, you could also apply for economic development and the recommended neighborhood category project for sewer this year if you have a job creator who needs public infrastructure in order to remove barriers to job creation in your community. That concludes the requirements of the citizens' participation piece of this puzzle. And lastly, we have a fair housing activity. Also out back at the desk and probably on the web, we'll ask that they'll be posted on the web. We'll have summaries of all this information for the public who want more information and want to email us or call us with questions. For fair housing, our fair housing activity is simply to remind the public that fair housing, like applying for a job, protects against discrimination. The same classes in terms of discrimination when applying for a job, race, color, age, national origin, religion, gender, familial status, or disability are protected when applying for rent, to buy a home, be it steering you to a certain neighborhood, discriminating against someone because they're a single mother or might be a senior citizen is discrimination against fair housing. There are ways to gain relief, file complaints locally with the county. There's an ordinance with the state of Florida and with HUD, and there are forms and packets out front for those who need relief or wish to find out more about fair housing. And thank you. That's all I have for you. Do you have questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, in reading through this, there's a lot of options here, but primarily the use of this money is going to be for the sewer projects that are stated here. Is that correct?
We have acknowledged one other portion. Maybe we can do some stormwater cleanup process. There may be some drainage improvements. We may be able to integrate it within it like that. We want to maximize the number of points in the application process, so we've sort of maximized the number of benefits we can achieve in the application.
So where you're going with this is all for general public good in a particular area,
yes.
not into like the neighborhood revitalization program
This
where
is
you're going
strictly-
around buying homes and so on and so forth.
This is strictly public good.
Okay, thank you.
And since we held the public hearing before you spoke, Corbett, I'll just ask if there's anybody from the audience who has any additional questions. There being none, gentlemen?
Just under some discussion, recently I was at the policy meeting of the statewide regional planning councils, and we had a update from a trade association attorney based out of Washington, D.C., and his message was the current mood in Washington, D.C. with the budget cuts and all that is for local CDBG projects, funding will be pretty much absolutely nil. So I don't mind sending the application in, but I think just a heads up, the likelihood of getting funding may be very, very slim, and I don't want anybody's expectations to be artificially raised.
It's my understanding this is from existing funding.
Well, I think all that's on the chopping block, too. I mean, if it hadn't been allocated and spent, I think they're going to, and I think Florida's going to be in a bad shape, because what the gentleman explained is, particularly those states that have turned down federal funding, that the mood in Washington is, if it's a local project, let the local folks pay for it. And, that's just the message that the guy brought, but for whatever.
I would hope this particular project, and we do a lot of projects, but I got to tell you, the West Wabasso area is in itself unique. And this is one of those projects you can stand proud afterwards and say, look, I was part of that.
Yeah, I have no issue with the project. I'm just trying to let everybody know that
would expect
I wouldn't count on any federal funds.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis, then Commissioner Wheeler.
Mr. Olson, I think that Commissioner O'Brien brought up a point that we really ought to take into consideration, and I appreciate our expert coming from Groveland, but I'm assuming he's not doing this for free. And
actually, he is.
This part
he's
of it
doing the application process without charge.
All right.
You can judge others by yourself.
What's that? So in the event that we actually get the grant, then I'm sure that's where he will be able to.
We will actually bid out the process.
Okay.
And when the actual implementation, he'll have to submit his bid just like anybody else.
All right, super.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, one other, I'm not sure, I don't recall where the money came from for Rockridge, for instance, the sewer project down there. And I assume in this contract, we don't have a copy of it in here, but it's probably the same as all the other grants where the federal government says, if we go back 20 years from now and we find out there's been an error someplace, we can ask for the money back. They're doing City of Vero Beach right now. They're doing us down at Rockridge with the sewer plant we put in there. And that's one of the big concerns I have is we get this money, we spend a few $1 million and we do something, or in this case, $750 or whatever. And then 5 years later, the government comes back and says, you know what, we found an error here and we want the money back. And I don't know where we are now has anything come of the situation down there?
The Rockridge project had two portions of funding. It had $4.2 million in CDBG funding and about $3.1 million in FEMA funding. We did receive a certain portion of the FEMA funding that was never requested to be returned, $2.8 million. They did request that it be de-eligibilized, if there is such a word like that.
We'll make it up.
We did submit a very extensive report to the contrary on that. We appealed it. We appealed it on time in a timely manner back in November. To this date, we have heard nothing from FEMA regarding that. So we question them where they're at. We've got $2.8 million is still sitting out there right this minute, but our position is that it was valid. It was valid then, it's valid today, and we would expect them to recognize that, and we fully expect that if they do send something that still questions the validity of it, we're going to send in a second appeal. We're going to carry forward with that.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fletcher.
I want to thank Eric and his staff for working through this process rather quickly. I believe the idea of the grant was just recently surfaced, and it addresses or may address a serious health and safety concern that's been discussed in the West Wabasso area. We've had a few public meetings in West Wabasso, and those concerns do exist, and I think this is at least one of the limited pathways that we can take to address those issues. I point out that there is no local public funding, no local match. There was nothing out of county funding. If this process is approved once we submit it, is that correct?
That's correct. This is our funding mechanism.
And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Commissioners, can I say something? I know Eric mentioned that it was an area that was overlooked, but I can assure you during my time period, this is an area that was not overlooked, and during this commissioner's tenure, in fact, we put in a whole park there, we put in pavilions, we put in water, we paved streets. So it's an area that's got a lot of improvements under this commission's direction and during my tenure. So I don't think it's been overlooked in any way at all.
Okay.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Davis. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Eric. Next up, we have public notice items, and I'll let Mr. Dubois read both 1 and 2.
Thank you, Chairman. The Board of County Commissioners will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, July 12, 2011, for the following purposes. 1, to discuss and solicit public input relating to the division of Indian River County into county commissioner districts in accordance with Article 8, Section 1E of the Florida Constitution and Section 124.01 Florida statutes, and 2, to adopt a redistricting plan setting forth the criteria upon which the new districts will be based. That is legislative. Second, the Board of County Commissioners will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, July 12, 2011, to consider adoption of an ordinance amending Chapter 315 of the Code of Indian River County entitled the Indian River County Pain Management Clinic and Controlled Substances Ordinance, regulating and prohibiting certain activities relating to the operation of certain pain management clinics and pharmacies which prescribe or dispense controlled substances, and providing for the severability, general repealer, and an effective date. That is also legislative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dubois. Next up, we have departmental matters, community development, consideration of a request from SMI Telecoms LLC for a local jobs grant. Good morning, Mr. Keaton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bob Keaton. I'm County Community Development Director. This item involves a request by SMI Telecoms for a local jobs grant. And unlike most local jobs grant applicants, SMI Telecoms has not requested confidentiality. Therefore, in this case, unlike most, we can actually name the jobs grant applicant who's coming before you. SMI Telecoms is a company that develops software for the global telecommunications industry, and as a telecommunications company, SMI Telecoms is one of the county's target industries, and therefore the company qualifies for a local jobs grant. Currently, SMI Telecoms has 43 employees worldwide, and the company plans to actually co-locate with NetBoss, which is a company that we recently gave a local jobs grant to, at NetBoss's location on 102nd Terrace. And SMI Telecoms is going to make that its national headquarters. And over the next year and a half, SMI Telecoms plans to hire about 25 employees, and that qualifies them for a local jobs grant of $169,000. Now, that jobs grant money is going to be paid out in 3 phases over a 5-year period. And the first payment for each phase will be 1 year after the jobs in that phase are created. And then the other 2 payments for that phase will be at 1-year intervals. And as you know, that's one of the benefits of the local jobs grant program. The grant money is paid only after the employees have been in place for at least a year. In this case, and with other local jobs grant, community development staff, county attorney staff, and Chamber of Commerce staff did a due diligence evaluation of the company, and in this case we found no problem with SMI Telecoms. Also, in your backup attached to the staff report is a draft jobs grant agreement, and that sets forth the parameters of the jobs grant, the responsibility of the applicant, and responsibilities of the county. So with that, staff recommends that the Board of County Commissioners approve the jobs grant for SMI Telecoms in the amount of $169,000 and authorize the chairman to sign the jobs grant agreement after it's been approved by all staff. So I want to tell you that Phil Brooks, who is the CEO of SMI Telecoms, is here today, and right now I'll turn it over to Helene Castleton and she can introduce Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, Helene.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Helene Castletine, Economic Development Director for the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce, 1216 21st Street, Vero Beach. And it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Phil Brooks, CEO of SMI Telecom. This is a great company, and we're very pleased that they are considering Indian River County. And just as a side note, with our business retention program, we do encourage our local businesses to talk with their colleagues, their vendors, and try to encourage them to locate to Indian River County. And in this case, it worked. It worked very well. NetBoss Technologies, Jim Odom, has been a great proponent of Indian River County, and this is the result. So we're very pleased to have Mr. Phil Brooks here in the audience, and he can talk to you a little bit about what his company will offer.
Thank you, Helene.
Good morning, Mr. Brooks. We're very happy to have you today in Indian River County.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you to the Board of County Commissioners for the opportunity to put forward the grant, and also a big thank you to the Community Development Department who've helped me put the application together, and actually the hospitality as well. I mean, Helene has been very hospitable to me and made me feel very welcome here in Indian River County, so thank you very much. So just a few slides. I don't want to bore you with a PowerPoint presentation. I do that to my customers.
Bob does it to us.
Right. So if we can just turn the slide. So the company's, it's quite a young company. It's only 2 years old. The company was formed from an acquisition of some intellectual property, some software intellectual property, back in 2009. The software is called the OS3 Suite. We have two operating companies. We have a US operating company and a UK operating company. Just the way things turned out with our initial investment was that the company was incorporated with the US company being the parent company. So the US company technically owns the UK company 100%. But the weight of the business was actually more European and Asia Pacific based. So that's really where the operates. It's a bit odd, but that's the way it started. So what we do, we're a software company, we're a technology company, much like NetBoss Technologies, and obviously in the same sort of industry as Harris Corporation. And as many of you will know, that NetBoss actually came out of Harris Corporation as well, and we've had a lot of dealings with them as well. So we're a technology company. We focus on the telecoms industry. When we talk about the telecoms industry, we're talking about traditional wireless operators, AT&T, Verizon, people like that, but also broadcasting companies, Comcast, all those sort of types of companies, and there's a whole mix of slew of communication service providers now that are building up now, providing all sorts of digital services, and so that's our customer base. And then of course our customer base is global as well. So the idea of the US office is to service the Americas up and down, side by side, but also we have some very big clients outside America, and the idea would be to support that as well. The way the company's set up at the moment, we have a London office, we've got a Singapore office, and a development centre in India, Bangalore, and we have a sales office up in New York, and the idea is obviously to have an operations centre down here. Just a lot of people obviously not in the industry, so yeah, but what is all this? Essentially, all the communication service providers will have some form of network operating centre. So this is a bit like Houston Control. There's a little photograph there. So it's a bit like this. Everyone's looking at all these screens up on the wall there, and essentially what they're looking at is the network and the health of the network, whatever type of network that might be. It might be, cable. It might be wireless. It might be satellite. Anything. And things are going wrong in that network. So NetBoss, just to give you the complete picture, NetBoss is their software actually monitors that environment for when things go down. And when they detect that things are not working, they create what they call alerts, and then they pass that alert to our software, and we manage the whole service management process to fault to resolution, and that's where the two softwares work side by side. Right. Our enemies, if you like, jointly are IBM and HP and CA, but the two small companies together do pretty good battle against them, and we've got quite a few war stories there. Okay. So in terms of the US growth plans, as I said, the idea is now Jim Odom has done the sales pitch to me, and I've spent enough time down here in the last few months to appreciate the local county and the sun and the rest of it. But no, we've done some tests We've done some test interviewing, and so we're fairly confident that we can actually grow the operations down here from local resources. Some of the specialist resources, because indeed we are a specialist technology company, we feel that we can homegrown from other industries and perhaps universities and that sort of stuff. But also we think that we can probably attract people down here as well. So we're fairly confident that we can do it. And you know, we're very small. We might not be the size of Harris, but you never know what's around the corner. So our plans at the moment are very conservative. These are small acorns. But like I said, I mean, we're living in a very big industry that's growing at a phenomenal rate. And if we don't get acquired in the next few years, then we should be able to grow organically and perhaps with some acquisition. So we'll see how it goes. But for the purpose of the application, we just wanted to keep it a little bit sort of conservative. So why Indian River County? Well, the primary reason was Jim Odom saying this was a good place to set up, and it made sense that our two technical teams actually sit side by side, because we're doing a lot of integration work now, which is pretty unique in the industry. I think there's an opportunity for us. I mean, we live in a pretty fickle world, and the IT technology industry is one of those fickle places where people move from company to company to company. That creates a huge problem for smaller companies where their whole proposition to market is based on intellectual capital. So actually being a little bit out of the way of the big cities and, you know, I wouldn't say less opportunity, but, you know, a different type of culture where people are a bit more loyal, I think works for us to build and retain that intellectual capital. So in the UK, for instance, our offices are actually 70 miles south of London, so we're out of the way. So we actually have a fairly local operation there as well. The airports, I've checked the airports out. Actually not a good time to be talking about the airports, because I got delayed coming in from London yesterday and managed to get here at 2:30 this morning. So, but I think it's a one-off, and I figured that actually the best bet for me and my other consultants is actually to probably transatlantic to go to Orlando, because at least it's one flight, then you're on the ground, and then you drive down. But the airports are fine. You know, obviously Melbourne is giving us a good access point to two major hubs, which pretty much gets us everywhere in the Americas. And then, of course, we have Orlando as a backup or an alternative to go transatlantic. And that airport is no further away than our airport in the UK, for instance. It's 1.5 hours up to Heathrow from where we're based. And I think the other thing about Indian River County is that, and certainly, you know, what NetBoss are telling us, is that customers are quite keen to come here. You know, so we're doing customer presentations. Jim has set up a customer NOC now. He's actually got a purpose-built NOC, so we now can showcase all our software. So we expect to see quite a bit of traffic coming in that way from our clients. And finally, as I said, and of course the sun shines all year round. For an English person, that's a lot. So thank you again. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Any questions for Mr. Brooks?
Just a couple comments. Bob, can you go back 2 or 3 slides? And while Bob's doing that, I just want to, you know, I get a lot of questions from the public about, you know, what are you doing for economic development? And I think, you know, we're reaching the point now where all the hard work we've done, that's good, Bob. All the hard work we've done over the last 5 years is really starting to come into fruition here. And I go back last year when North Carolina Bank was looking to build their operations center in a different county. And one of our local businessmen, you know, Chuck Meckling, stepped up and said, wait a minute, you know, you need to look at Indian River County. And so we got the opportunity to make our pitch, and then North Carolina is building their operations center here and keeping the jobs here. And then now with NetBoss and Jim Odom working to bring Phil and his company here, and you look at that top line there, the national headquarters in Sebastian, you know, that's just phenomenal. And I think we need to get that message out that economic development in a lot of instances is a lot of hard work and a lot of little baby steps. You know, you don't get a lot of, you know, 400 job companies coming in. Those are pretty rare, but it's these smaller, growing technology companies that we've been attracting and working hard to bring here. Don't get the big headlines, but they're probably more important than the big numbers. And you know, Phil said sunshine's important. I guess some of the UK staff is kind of hankering to come to the new national headquarters in Sebastian. So one of the things we're working on is to change that word national to global headquarters in Sebastian, Florida. So we'll keep working on that. But Phil, glad you're here. Welcome. Anything we can do to, help this go smooth forward, we'll be glad to step up and do. But I just will tell the commission, this is from all of our hard work. It's starting to finally pay off, where we get local businesses recommending and recruiting other businesses to come here, because Indian River County is business friendly, and we're doing all we can to attract these companies. So, Phil, again, thank you, welcome, and glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you.
And just as an aside, I had a conversation with Mr. Odom the other day, before this came about, and I understand they're getting ready to ramp up by another 20 employees also that should be coming from us. They're actually coming from Russia, from what I gather. So, and that's with NetBoss, not with SMI. So, not at work to get them here. Now that's working to grow them here.
Well, with this all being said, I'd be very happy to entertain a motion.
I'm glad to make a motion to approve the job grant application with SMI Telecoms LLC.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Wheeler. Any other comments besides from welcome? I'll have the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Booth, and good luck. Thank you. Next up, we have a request to amend the Neighborhood Stationalization Program Community Development Block Grant Housing Assistance Plan. And it looks like Bob is going to help us with this also.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. This item involves a minor amendment to the Neighborhood Stabilization Program Housing Assistance Plan. And as you know, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program involves buying foreclosed or abandoned homes, fixing them up, and then either selling or renting them to qualified households. And this is NSP1. And with NSP1, the county has been partnering with the Housing Authority, which is purchasing and reselling homes, and the Homeless Services Council, which is purchasing and then renting out the homes. Now, the document that's proposed to be amended today, the Housing Assistance Plan, is actually the document that has all the rules regarding how Indian River County's Neighborhood Stabilization Program will work. Now, this proposed HAP amendment affects only the resale portion of the program. It doesn't have anything to do with the rental part of it. Now, in terms of the resale portion, the county, together with the Housing Authority, has purchased 19 houses so far, and we've sold 4 of them. And most of the others have been rehabilitated now and are on the market for sale. And recently, since we got a few sales under the belt, there's been more interest in buying the homes. And we've also got the homes on the multiple listing service, and we're offering to pay realtors a 3% commission if they bring a buyer for the houses. Now, what this proposed amendment will do is change the required down payment to be paid by buyers of NSP houses from 1.75% of the sales price to $500. And that 1.75% of the sale price was put in the Housing Assistance Plan because the NSP, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program rules, require that a buyer has to pay half of the required down payment when he buys an NSP home. And back when we put this in and we're working with local lenders, the expectation was these buyers are all going to get FHA financing, which requires a 3.75% down payment, or 3.5% down payment, and 1.75% would be half of that. Now, since then, the Department of Community Affairs, which is actually administering the Neighborhood Stabilization Program at the state level, has made an interpretation that the NSP rules would still be complied with if the half of the requirement or more than half of the required down payment is paid with NSP funds, as long as those NSP funds are structured as a second mortgage against the property. And because of that, a number of communities have gone to a $500 down payment requirement for applicants. In fact, both St. Lucie County and Port St. Lucie are requiring $500 down payment instead of half of the required down payment. And as a matter of fact, the lenders who are working with us have requested that we change this to be similar to St. Lucie County and Port St. Lucie, because it will actually qualify more buyers. And actually, as an aside, let me just tell you how the sale of NSP homes works. Since the county and the housing authority have bought these homes and fixed them up, and now they're available for resale, what the county can do is, using the NSP funds that have already been the basis of acquiring the property, we require a buyer to get a principal mortgage for the house, whatever amount that the buyer can afford, keeping in mind that buyers shouldn't pay more than 30% of their income for housing costs. And the county actually has been subsidizing to some extent, or providing a deferred payment second mortgage for the closing costs, half the down payment assistance, and gap financing. So this can be as much as 30% of the cost of the house. To give you an example, if it's a $100,000 house that we're selling, and the buyers can qualify for a $70,000 mortgage, we would provide the down payment assistance, which in this case up to now has been 1.75%, so it'd be $1,750, would provide the closing cost, and would provide the difference between that $1,750 and the $70,000 that the applicant could pay. So generally would be paying a little more than, there'd be a little more than $30,000 that would be the deferred payment second mortgage on the house. So with this change, instead of having the 1.75% down payment requirement and having $500, there are really a couple of benefits. And the lenders have been stressing that to us, one of which is more people qualified to buy these houses, since there'll be less out-of-pocket money that they'll need to bring to the closing table. And the other thing is, instead of getting an FHA loan, which requires mortgage insurance, which is an additional payment, the money that we're providing as the gap financing can be used as down payment. And actually, these buyers can get a conventional mortgage because they can pay more than 20% of the value of the house as a down payment, and a conventional mortgage does not require mortgage insurance. So actually, there are two ways that this allows more buyers to qualify to buy the NSP houses that we have. And I know this gets kind of complicated the way we're doing. There are a lot of moving parts to the NSP program, but this is really just another tweak in the program that I think will make the program work a little better. So with that, staff recommends that the board approve the Housing Assistance Plan Amendment and authorize the chairman to sign the amendment.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Mr. Keating?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I'd like to go through a hypothetical scenario here. So I want to make sure I understand this clearly, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You got a guy or a family of four living in a $200,000 house. The economy turns. They can't afford the mortgage payment on it anymore because one of them lost their jobs. So they abandon the house and it's foreclosed. Now it's worth $70,000, but maybe we buy it with these funds and put $30,000 in to rebuild it because the kitchen was destroyed or whatever. So the family that owned it lost $100,000. Then their credit was ruined because they lost the house, so that they aren't qualified to come back in and get the house. So then we go out and we look for somebody that can't afford more than a $500 down payment. And then the county takes taxpayers' money and pays up to $30,000 for closing costs and stamps and uses 20% for the down payment. So they can qualify for a mortgage that's artificial, because the loan we're giving them, the $30,000, let's say, we're using your numbers, as I understand, there's no interest on that loan. And after 15 years, it's free if they stay in the house for 15 years. So we're kind of putting people back in homes they can't afford. Maybe they can at the time, but they really can't because they couldn't afford it unless we were giving them the $30,000 on top to do all this stuff. And the people that are out here and one of the spouses or the family members lost their job, they can no longer afford to buy the house because they're paying taxes to support the program that's selling their house to somebody else that can't afford it. And I got a problem with that. That's why I voted against the grant when we went for it. The other problem I have with it is the clawback that the federal government has where we run into problems just like we have with the sewer plant. And, you know, this whole thing just, in my opinion, you know, and I'm not against people trying to get in a house, but, you know, people have to start taking care of themselves. And you start looking at the taxes we're paying, the federal level, and the people that are paying taxes. If you're above the whatever the level is, $70,000 a year, if you're at $71,000, you don't even qualify to go in and do this. But at $71,000, you're still paying taxes, so the guy making $1,000 less a year than you can go qualify, get a cheap house with a $500 down payment. And I just don't understand where this is going. I mean, where's the incentive to go out and be successful and move forward? You know, I'm for giving a hand up, but we're taking care of people. And I just disagree with it, and I can't support this.
In response to that, Commissioner Wheeler, I agree with a lot of what you say, but in this case, I believe this is just a modification of an existing program. Yes, it has a number of problems, but at this point, it's well on its way down the road, and I think that what this is basically doing is just trying to give it a little bit more chance of success. Well, look at this in the same way I had a problem with the beach renourishment. I certainly didn't and initially voted against the county paying for that stockpiling of the sand. I thought that was exactly the wrong way to go. But today I voted for it because at this point we're 90% down the way. It's not a principle that I need to stand on and try to block something. So, you know, for the similar type of reasons, I think that what's being asked for here is something just to, as Bob said, tweak the program a little more to give it a little bit better chance for success at the back end. I look forward to working with you to stop other big federal programs, including on August 10th, when I hope everybody shows up to fight the waste of Amtrak. But in this case, I think this is something which helps a lot of people in our community and is not quite the place to make that stand.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I voted against this when we went for the grant because, you know, people just have a problem turning down what they perceive to be something free. And that's what we're doing with these grants. And it's time that at the local level, you know, I think government works from the bottom up, not the top down. And at the local level, people need to quit saying, well, if I don't take it, somebody else is going to take it. And the taxes keep going up and government keeps getting bigger and we start losing more freedoms. And I'm just, you know, and I was opposed to asking for the grant. I voted against accepting the grant, and I'm going to vote against this.
Very good. Any other comments? There being none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Fletcher. Any other discussion?
Yes, I think I'm not going to support this, but I'm going to base it on, I don't know how much you're actually helping somebody out with home ownership, especially if they're not to the point where they have that figure to move in. I don't know that could quite possibly be tearing families apart versus helping them out. To go through moving into a home, not being able to stay there, and then losing it through a foreclosure process. I don't know that that's smart, in my opinion. So I'm not going to support the motion.
And on that one, perhaps because I know someone who used a similar type of program years ago, and he's been able to have a home and have a place for his family all to stay when he may otherwise not have. I mean, it could have caused the separation of his family. I'll be voting for it. So, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
That's Commissioner Davis and Wheeler against. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Utility Services, State Road 60 from 58th Avenue to 66th Avenue, a resolution of conflicts with proposed DOT drainage improvements through labor contract and approval of FDOT agreement to raise the value of boxes. Good morning again, Mr.
Well, good morning. For the record, again, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. This is part of a DOT widening project, basically from 58th going to 66th. The last of a sequence has already taken place, and what we're being asked to do is to enter into a contract to pay for the raising of the water valves and sewer valves between 58th and 66th. This will be done by the DOT contractor. We ourselves will actually do a project in conjunction with our labor contractor that will modify a water line to avoid a drainage conflict So the total together on this thing is really what we're talking about today. I will say one thing that I find often interesting when I look at these, because Indian River County is in a position to be able to respond to these rather quickly. If you see the dates on the emails, you see they're rather quickly on these things. So kind of a sort of a plus in terms of what the county has the ability to work with.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Olson?
Eric, are we going to have to issue any bonds or anything to pay for this, or is it all cash funded?
No. I think we can probably find some money somewhere to be able to do that.
Another cash-funded county project. Very good,
I've
Mr.
heard that
Olson.
to be the case.
Are we going to have to raise our water rates or anything to cover this?
I think
or-
the rates have been good since '99, and I suspect they'll probably continue that way for a while.
And we're able to determine that based on a rate study that was done in-house as opposed to having a consultant do it.
Yes.
Very good.
And if we hire a consultant, we usually will follow their recommendation.
Wow.
Correct.
Unless it's impact fees.
Probably gone far enough with this one, Cheryl.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner, is that Fletcher?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. The next is final payment of Spoonville Marsh Wetland Floating Vegetative Mats.
Yes, again, for the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. This is at the Spoonville Marsh, and as the Commission is aware, what we did is we contracted with BMATS Corporation to install a floating mat system, which is part of the cleansing system for nitrogen and phosphorus. This is the final pay application for that particular project. It's complete. We're just going to watch it grow.
And a couple of the commissioners were at the Spoonville Marsh last week when we had a public opening for it. And Henry Stevens, he's not here right now, he actually wrote a very nice article about it in the Press Journal. This is one of the coolest things going, and it took what I think Eric and others described as two liabilities, a dirty lagoon and brine, and put them together to make an asset, which was cleaner water for our community.
Worked well.
Worked well. Looks like it's continuing to work well, and the things were said like this is a model for both statewide and national projects. We had Jim Egan from the Marine Resources Council, who is basically an environmental watchdog, just praising this project. And for me personally, it's one of those reasons why I'm very happy and proud to be a county commissioner. So you and everybody on your staff there, congratulations for this project. And given how good this project was and how good those floating mats looked out there, I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
I would like to make that motion.
I'll be happy to second it.
It was actually a beautiful visit that we had, and as a matter of fact, some of the discussion, Eric, I just want to thank you again for putting that all together. I think that Charlie Sembler's poignant discussion about the oysters and many of the other discussions that followed and ensued about what was actually happening there was extremely rewarding. I just think that location is a tremendous asset to the community. In addition, and it was said it best. Took two liabilities and made just one beautiful fauna.
Actually a third, because that habitat had been an old citrus grove that had been let go and was pretty much filled with invasive species. And it is just a lovely park with a lovely boardwalk now.
And it's getting better as time goes on.
It's tremendous. So
it was exploding with wildlife.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Davis.
But one thing that I don't like is, and I don't know how we're going to address it, is how can we increase the public's access to the facility?
You know, that's a good question. When we originally developed the project, we worked with Grand Harbor, and at the time, if we can all recall, Grand Harbor had a pretty aggressive development plan. Since that time, obviously, the economy has changed things. Their ownership has changed with Grand Harbor related to this 400 acres that they were going to be part of the development. The Conservation Land Group has been purchasing land adjacent to this, almost using the Spoonville as a catalyst. Although it was of a concern with Grand Harbor at the time, and the key is at the time, that public access may be disruptive if it ever got developed as they had planned at the time. It may be a different picture today, and I think the kind of the response that we've been receiving from people that go out there, we've had, you know, just a variety of conservation groups that have gone out there and had open houses, and it's just been, you know, tremendously successful. I think it's time to kind of go back to Grand Harbor and say, look, we need to recognize this as a little bit better process than what you had envisioned, early on whenever we acquired the land site itself. So,
Can I make a few comments? One of the concerns that we would have is this number one thing was to get rid of the brine and do something that was innovative. I think you'd have to have limited access because of you've got an oyster. You'd have to have tours and things like that. And I think it'd be better to set up the public. That's secondary to what we're doing out there.
Actually, we have a public-private partnership with the Indian River Land Trust that's going along Indian River Boulevard now. And as Eric mentioned, they've purchased lands, I think, both to the north and south of that property.
Yes.
So I think down the line is if that public-private partnership along Indian River Boulevard works out, then this would be the next setting for the next type of public-private partnership. And it may not be the Indian River Land Trust that does the management portion of it, but it may be some other group that does it. But this is, I think, ripe for members of our community who are concerned with the basic conservation of our resources to step in and get up a group who will basically act like docents at the museum and shepherd it on different days. So I think there are a lot of possibilities. Probably won't be this year or next year, but I think that is a good chance.
Yes, I think that meets Commissioner Davis's, that's what we're going to commit. That's a good idea because that's what Commissioner Davis wants to make sure people get out there, and that would be a perfect partnership. I would like to commend Eric especially and his staff. This is really innovative, and Eric really needs to be commended. This is a lot of work and creative.
No, you're absolutely, and that's one thing that as far as if with it being such a success, the only way we're going to be able to get more public buy-in with this is to let them see firsthand what it's doing versus talking about it in abstract terms.
But I think, as Joe said, and he is correct in this sense, I don't envision for some foreseeable period where it's just open to the public carte blanche. Clearly, our intent from the very beginning was to link with places like the Environmental Learning Center to become sort of a process where we work perhaps with kids as a learning process, and as we kind of walk before we run, we'll kind of establish what you can really do without harming the process and without having ourselves. We do have pump stations out there that are kind of hidden away, but we want it to be under a controlled system like that.
Mr. Chairman, we often talk about artist rendering as in just a couple of strokes of watercolors on a sketch, and the project never really comes to that value or what it appears to be on an artist rendering. And I'll tell you what, I remember just a couple of years ago looking at an artist rendering with you and Chip Swindell, and I'll tell you what, it is exactly what was anticipated, what was projected. So I think we need to be proud of this project and somehow work the public into seeing this.
I think we'll be doing that. But we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Next up, South Wastewater Treatment Facility 2012 Florida Department of Environmental Protection operational permit renewal. Eric?
Still for the record, Eric Olson. Every 5 years, the wastewater plants are required to get a permit renewal. They're rather complex. It's not just simply filling out a set of paperwork. You have to do an analysis on it. And in the process, we've used other consulting firms to do this. In this case, we're requesting to use MBV Engineering to go ahead and complete it for this go-around. The final product is due to be sent out in January, so we've got time to do it. It looks like it's going to be done in time, so that's our recommendation.
Staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Bryan, second from Commissioner Flesher, but Eric, would it be possible as you go through this, and this is $20,000, and I might take it that you're going to have to do the same thing for the north or the west plant, and then do it again in another 5 years, is it? So I'm wondering if, as you go through the process, if you can see whether there's some things which just add to the bureaucracy but not the quality of the project, and come up with 1 or 2 pages of recommendations, because I think the environment in the state of Florida right now is as good as it's going to get to get rid of some unnecessary bureaucracy.
You are absolutely correct. DEP has actually contacted utilities across the state several months ago asking for if you would, suggestions to begin to streamline things. I mean, a lot of times historically, it's been kind of a focus on how many pages you can fill in, how many things you can do, how many questions you can answer, and you look at them, when everything is said and done, you begin to ask the question, what is it they really want? So you're absolutely correct. Maybe there's an opportunity.
If we can make that part of the process, I'd like it. I mean, just as one example, that actually Phil Mattson and the Transportation Disadvantage Committee was actually successful with. There was something for a group, they had to send in this report every year, 115 pages. And we just wrote to them, Phil wrote to them, and asked if we could do it every 5 years, or just send in the information that changed. And we approved the report for this year at the last meeting, and it was 6 pages. All we did was have to send in pages where we actually made changes. So 6 pages versus 115, I thought was a tremendous improvement. And if we could go ahead and do this, it'd be great. Thanks. So we have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And that leaves Commissioner matters. We've got one matter from myself. And as some of my fellow commissioners are aware, I was a little bit upset a couple of weeks ago when a citizen said that our meetings were dull compared to the meetings of the city of Vero Beach. So in order to spiff up our meetings a little bit and to continue our birthday celebration, I offer this very short history of the birth of America. The French and Indian War ended in 1763, bringing peace to the colonies. However, there we go. However, the Parliament in London and nasty tyrant George III could not leave well enough alone. They soon began subjecting the colonists to many unfriendly acts, including multiple attempts at taxation without representation. Finally, in December of 1774, a group of Bostonians had a tea party. This led to even more intolerable acts by the tyrant George III. On April 18, 1775, Paul Revere went for a ride, and the next day at Lexington and Concord, shots were fired that were heard around the world. Things did not get better when, in January of 1776, Commissioner Davis's spiritual godfather, Thomas Paine, published Common Sense. Soon there was no turning back, and on July 2, 1776, the Continental Congress passed a resolution of independence. This was enough for the boys in Philadelphia, but some felt that more was needed for the rest of the world, so Thomas Paine wrote, Benjamin Franklin edited, and on July 4, 1776, some brave lads signed a Declaration of Independence because a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. And, as they say, the rest is history. Thank you.
You know, one thing, Bob, I wish you put in that is the risk of life, limb, and their fortunes that sign that declaration and what they put on the line.
Well, that's the moderate-length version, which I'll be happy to produce next year.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that was the most exciting meeting I think we've had in years. Thank you for introducing some fireworks into our meeting.
And notice, though, I want to point out 2 things. One is that those fireworks could be seen by even those who were in bed before the fireworks went out at night. And second, this is very green and sustainable and low cost. I mean, we can produce these same fireworks year after year with no impact on the environment and no further cost to the taxpayer.
I think Peter could have read that with a little more emotion than you did, but...
We could just show videos.
No, everybody's a critic around here.